Welcome to the ANEW Insight podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogrammed Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. And Chantal Donnelly, physical therapist and author of Settled, How to Find Calm in a Stress-Inducing World. Here at City Club Los Angeles, we follow our guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hello and welcome to the ANEW Insight podcast. I am Dr. Supatra Tovar, and I am thrilled to have Drs. Nazanin Moali and Dr. Richard Espinosa with us today. They are going to talk about their matchmaking service, LA Love Lab, and we cannot wait. Welcome, you two.
Thank you.
Yay.
I'm going to read a little bit about these lovely doctors, and then we will get right into our questions. Dr. Nazanin Moali, Dr. M, is a licensed clinical psychologist, consultant, and researcher based in California, known for her specialized expertise in eating disorders and addiction. With extensive training from leading experts, Dr. Moali combines her academic background in biology and psychology from UC San Diego with advanced degrees in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University and Alliant International University. I went there too.
Yay.
She brings a wealth of experience from her work in chemical dependency, addiction treatment, and eating disorder therapy to her practice. As a frequent speaker at major universities and international conferences, Dr. Moali also provides guidance on local television, addressing key areas in mental health and wellness. She also has a very popular podcast called Sexology, and she has amazing podcast episodes, so I recommend you check her out. Now, Dr. Richard Espinosa, known as Dr. E, is a Los Angeles-based clinical psychologist and relationship expert, renowned for his work in sexuality and modern matchmaking. With a unique approach to relationship dynamics, Dr. E blends psychological assessments, talk therapy, and matchmaking to empower individuals and foster authentic connections. His expertise spans teaching, activism, and public speaking, where he shares practical insights on self-discovery and relational growth. Dr. E's initiatives aim to build stronger, healthier connections through accessible, transformative guidance on relationship and sexuality topics. Welcome, both of you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much for having us, yeah.
Well, I'm so excited to hear about LA Love Lab. But before we get into that, I want to know from both of you, we can start with Dr. E and then go to Dr. M, a little bit about yourselves, about your road to becoming psychologists and what made you two then team up to develop LA Love Lab. Dr. E.
Okay, so I can just say ditto to the intro that was said. Ditto. That's me. I am a sexuality specialist. I identify as a gay man, and it kind of wasn't a question for me. I just knew I wanted to work with my queer community, and it just happened. It just unfurled. So like even from the beginning of my clinical training and such, I was always funneled the LGBTQ plus identified patients, and I realized just early on I really enjoyed working within my own community. And the thing that I heard the most when I would try to just level and develop rapport with clients early on, especially in the early training years, was that the clients that I was working with usually had a few prior therapists. Most of the time, and that's just how math works, most of their therapists were allies or somehow, just straight identified. Mm-hmm. And so the biggest concern I'd hear from members of my own community was that clinicians kind of tense up or just don't know how to discuss their relationship concerns. Yeah. So early on, I noticed that gap within my community and within treatment, and so I filled it, and here I am now. So I really enjoy working with people, of all walks of life with their relationships and just helping them just feel comfortable, contained, safe to talk about their love lives, their sex lives, and just how they bond with other people.
What made you want to become a psychologist?
Ooh, good question. So the grad school answer for my grad school interviews was that I know what it's like to be wanted, be needed. I like helping people, and I like getting into people's minds. I have to say it's still dynamic, my answer. I really enjoy having in-depth conversations with people. I really appreciate when people are vulnerable and open up to me. It's kind of like my own private, like, audible book of someone's autobiography. So I'm still working on my answer. I just know I love it where I'm at, and maybe decades from now I'll have that polished answer. But
Well,
for now, that's what
all
I got.
we need to know is that you love it, because I think that just fuels the work. And by the way, fun fact, the three of us are all on the board of the Los Angeles County Psychological Association. That's how we met. And so these two especially have such a passion for what they do, but also for giving back to the community and really kind of spreading, destigmatizing mental health and, making it accessible for all. So we're really, really lucky to have you both on the board. Dr. M, give us a little insight into how you got into psychology. What was your inspiration? And then you can tell us how the two of you formed LA Love Lab.
Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity. I was born and raised in Iran in a very conservative community, and there was a huge stigma related to mental health. I was born right after revolution during the war, so firsthand I've noticed how people suffering, it was impacting their quality of life and how much pain they were enduring, and the message they were getting, like, oh, toughen up. Like, it's like you focus on life, and people were in survival mode. So early on, I realized that people's pain is worth paying attention to, because sometimes you have a broken leg, everyone is there to help you. But if you have depression, anxiety, people think that's something that you can just push it aside. So that was something I was very passionate about, helping people with acute mental illness ever since I was younger. In my culture, like, the options are whether you're a physician, you're an engineer. So I was an undergrad, and then I was studying biology. I started working at VA and doing internship with VA for research and hearing people's stories. And I was so moved by people's stories of resiliency, going through these tough situations, and learning about their lives was so inspiring. So that's why I was like, oh, I want to be in the business of helping people heal, and also being part of their journey of rediscovering themselves. And it's been such a rewarding journey, which it is for all of us, I can imagine. As far as how Dr. E and I came up to this idea is that we see lots of professional, successful people in our practices. And over lunch one day, we're chatting about how challenging it is to see all these wonderful people that they want to be in relationships. They have self-awareness, they're invested, but they're suffering because there's not a way for them to connect. And we were talking about how online dating often fails people.
Yes.
Right? Like, they're going over and over doing these dates, and they feel they're so unmotivated. So we were thinking about if we can curate these events based on the psychology tenant that we know that can help people increase their possibility of meeting the mate. That was something that we wanted to be part of.
Oh, I love that. So what are some of the psychology tenets that people need to embrace in order to find their mate?
One of the bigger one is having this awareness, self-awareness about who am I, what are my needs, and what are my values. Because we are living in a society that kind of force us to portray this version of ourselves. Like, in order to be able to be desirable, dateable, you gotta present just one version of yourself. And people going on these dates not showing their authentic self, and that gets in the way of them connecting. So I think self-awareness is one of the biggest tenets.
Absolutely. What do you think?
I think expanding on something that Dr. M said, it's, yes, we are forced to give one dimension of ourselves to other people. We are, in our current society and how social media and mass communication goes, we're encouraged to give a one-dimensional curated version of ourselves. And I think expanding on what Dr. M just said, just accepting that you, me, all of us, we're multidimensional creatures. So we really need to unabashedly explore all of the dimensions of ourselves, even the parts that don't look as polished, as curated. And so it's still on that note of just self-understanding, self-awareness, but all of the self, not just...
So how do people do that then? How do they show? I think it's a really vulnerable space. I mean, I've done online dating. That's actually how I met my husband.
Okay.
And yay, it worked out. Hooray. But I think that you do have to present a kind of a package, I guess, because it's almost like you're, online shopping. But then how do you show more of you in that initial meeting?
I think it starts before that initial meeting. Still on the theme of self-discovery, I think it honestly starts with having deep, honest conversations, yes, with the self, but with other people, with trusted loved ones, with a psychotherapist, someone who you know is going to hold you accountable and remain objective from time to time, hold space for you, and ultimately, call you out when you need to be. I think we all would benefit from that before we even try to go on that first date. But to answer your question, when we're on that first date, I think it starts, that little bit of vulnerability that really goes a long way starts with simply maybe just saying, you know what, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm excited to see you, but I'm also nervous at the same time. And I think really that brings down a lot of defenses already when you're just getting to know somebody.
I actually think vulnerability is a strength. People think that it makes them look weak, but I think when you are relatable and you admit that you have, these nerves and you're a little scared or you're anxious, it helps to open up that conversation. But what do you think are like the most common barriers? That's probably one, trying not to be vulnerable. But what are the most common barriers people face when trying to form these genuine connections, especially in today's dating environment?
I see one of the challenges for my client is this feeling of dating fatigue, right? You're going on so many dates and it feels like second job for many of my clients. And it's hard to be present. In order for you to be able to connect, to be vulnerable, you got to be present. But if you're feeling jaded, discouraged, not present, that gets in the way of really connecting with people. So I think bringing intentionality to dating, that can really help people to find and get better matches.
What do you think?
I think, so mine is going to sound paradoxical, but I think the unwillingness to be single, to be with oneself. I think, unfortunately, the way that many folks that I've worked with cope with that inability, unwillingness to be single is to go the opposite, go really hard and almost often scare people off. Just going in too hard, coming off a bit too clingy, too dependent, because a person fears being by oneself.
So how do you cultivate that? If you are so afraid of being alone, how do you cultivate being okay with being single?
What I would suggest is confronting it. Consciously dedicating an era in one's life. An era can be any time span for that person, but carve out and consciously carve out some time to just be single and to sit with that and to really ask oneself, like, can I go through a winter holiday season unpartnered? Can I go through X, Y, and Z? Could I go through a birthday or so forth? And just to be hopefully comfortably single at one point.
Yeah. I have a tip. Get a dog. That makes it really easy to be single. That actually makes you not want to go out because you want to be with your dog. What do you think of that?
You heard it here first, y'all.
All right, so let's hear about LA Love Lab. What makes this matchmaking service different from all the others, and why should people choose it?
Well, one of the intentions that Dr. E and I had was to make sure that we are matching people that they're aligned in their values. Sometimes we are going on dating apps, they're just like based on the profiles, and it's hard to be really open. But if you know there's someone that does the assessment for you, you know this person that's in front of you, they have similar values and they're aligned on important aspects of life, that is really helpful for people. So that's one of the bigger part of our job, is to do a great job, hopefully, with screening and helping people to feel safe. And their job is just to show up and check in with themselves about chemistry, because I think chemistry is important. It's something that you want to check in person. But as far as logistical part about kind of value alignment, that's something that we do for them. And also we offer mini teaching mastermind at the beginning of all of our events. So we help people with the skills that they can use on that day to be able to show the best version of themselves.
Yes. So walk me through it. Somebody wants to do this. How do they sign up? And what are the steps that they go through?
So they look us up, lalovelab.com, and you'll see on the landing page where you can sign up for the event. So you sign up, we give you your Love Hub account.
Love Hub.
And then part of that is our online matchmaking quiz. And this is where you can be as honest and authentic as you'd like, which we highly encourage that. And we ask the tough questions so you don't have to, so that you can genuinely have a first date rather than a first interview.
Oh, wow. So what does the quiz entail?
We look on that theme of being multidimensional. We assess attachment style, values, intimacy, sexual preferences, and so forth.
Do you make sure to match up an anxious and an avoidant?
If you want to be cruel.
That's the most common pairing of all. How do you avoid that? Because I think that those, two attachment styles are the most commonly attracted to each other.
Still on my same theme of confronting it. So our initial masterclass will describe briefly attachment styles so that people can get an understanding of where they're coming from. And then we also briefly describe why, yes, it's tantalizing for the anxious and the avoidant to come together. It's tale as old as time. But we actually tell you, okay, now we're going to ask you to do something different. We're going to ask you to challenge that. What if you actually were matched with someone who's also anxiously attached? You could see what that's like. What if you're avoidantly attached? What if we match you with someone who's also of that same attachment style? And God forbid, it may actually work.
Interesting. I like that. What do you think about, what attachment styles are most compatible together?
Well, our hope is to help people to move to a secure attachment style, right? That's something we do in therapy. And it's not like you cannot change your attachment style. I think it's all about learning about your patterns. And what we do is we give people feedback afterward. And when we review the application, we figure out some people might not be ready for relationship or pursuing dating. So that's the place we give them information. But again, our hope is to give people tools so in this new relationships, they can move toward secure attachment styles. So because we want to make sure that people have corrective experiences. Because if we're repeating our past, then it will be hard to have better experiences.
This is awesome. You do not see
you.
this in any matchmaking service. Really kind of delving into our attachment styles and, what makes us tick. I think that's brilliant. What's the next step after that? They take the quiz, and then what?
Then we give them our feedback. First off, let them know, if they're a good fit for our event or if they're not. And then the next step is showing up to the event.
Okay, so what are the events like?
Our event is like one step before what Dr. E was mentioning, is that we are going to go over every single application that we get, and we're going to pre-match them. Kind of thinking about based on the values that they have, different intimacies that they seek, we match them. So after the dating kind of master session, then they go on these dates that we curate for them, for people that we think they're a match. And there will be an opportunity for people to mingle with all participants afterwards. And I think that
Wow.
also gives them tons of good ideas, right? So why I'm not attracted to someone that's compatible, that's curated for me, but I'm eyeing this person that's very distracted. And I think that's also can be a good opportunity for people to see live what's working for them and what's not. And hopefully after the event, we're doing a post survey, and then that's a place that we hopefully have tons of matches and we can
Yeah.
connect people then.
Right. So, obviously, they're going to go on these dates and they're going to be communicating with each other. As psychologists, do you help them with communication skills? And, if, say, somebody's just listening to this and not a part of LA Love Lab, maybe they're across the country or across the world, how do they improve their communication skills?
Excellent. So when people go onto our landing page, we have the opportunity to provide them our free initial masterclass. So it's a condensed version of what the greater masterclass would be, and that's going to start people off with self-confidence boosting tips and communication skills. Two of the more important things that we've both seen clinically over the years that people really need to develop and cultivate these really meaningful relationships. And so when it comes to communication skills, we give you first off the fundamentals, and then again we expand it more in the actual masterclass itself. And then after the event, with the mingling hour, the last section of our event, that's where it's time for rubber to meet road. And so you get to actually apply it here.
Oh, wow. So you have them practice it?
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. I definitely have never heard of a group like that coming together to improve that. If somebody is not able to join your workshop, how do they go about identifying and addressing their own relationship patterns and their behaviors that might be self-sabotaging?
One thing I think is very important, I guess the starting part, would be reflecting on the patterns in your relationships. What are some of the stories you're telling about your past relationships? Because we all have patterns from our childhood that we are repeating. So I think identifying the patterns are very important. And sometimes our shame, the strong emotions that we have about ourselves, can get in the way of us seeing these patterns. Kind of like knowing back then with the information you had, you did your best. But let's look at these patterns and see kind of like what part of these patterns was your responsibility. I think one part of emotional maturity is for people to identify what part of this I contributed to, whether I chose the wrong person, whether I stayed in a relationship that wasn't healthy for me, I wasn't decisive, all of that. And if you're struggling with this, working with a therapist is very helpful because it's a muscle. The more you practice objectively assessing your pattern, the better you get. But to start it, it's important to have a guide that can help you with this journey.
Right. What do you two see as the most common relationship patterns that are self-sabotaging?
I see a lot, and this also piggybacks off what Dr. M just said. I see a lot of people not willing to see their contribution to prior relationships not working out, or really not wanting to look at those patterns, sometimes when it's right in their face for that as well. So one of the freebies we'll give here is like the DBT scale of build a case for the other side. So when you actually feel an intense emotion, especially when it's related to relationships. So this falls under the relationship effectiveness or interpersonal effectiveness subcategory of DBT, where, okay, you feel an intense emotion. It was probably prompted by some sort of interpersonal snafu that happened. Okay, how could I actually defend the other side? How could I actually see through their eyes in this situation? How could I actually see how maybe I offended them, or maybe I miscommunicated something?
Yes.
So that's just one of the various skills that we apply and educate our attendees with.
And just to illuminate for our audience that might not know what DBT is, can you explain that to them?
So it's dialectical behavior therapy, started by Marsha Linehan, and it's specifically intended for people living with borderline personality disorder, but it's not exclusive these days to that anymore. all people can benefit from regulating their emotions and developing better skills to interact with other people, skills to feel better about ourselves, developing mindfulness, and developing just better ways to just interact with others for that. And so DBT, sometimes that concerns people when they hear like acronyms or such, but it's just regulating one's emotions. And yes, it was started with the population that, emotion dysregulation is kind of the name of the game, but it's for all persons that deal with intense emotions, which I think all of us can have moments like that.
Absolutely. Well, this is a really fascinating service, and I think really novel. I've never heard of anything like this, and I'm sure people are going to be flocking to you in Los Angeles. Is there any potential for any kind of nationwide application, or are you solely Los Angeles based?
At this point, we're doing an LA event to see how much we can add to the community. But hopefully, when it's successful, our plan is to expand it.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Well, we're out of time for this half of this podcast, but we have tons more questions that I want to ask you. So everyone, come back for the second half of this amazing episode with Doctors E and M, and we are going to learn a little bit more about relationships and the LA Love Lab. Thanks so much for joining us this week. Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Body Insight podcast. Please remember, the content shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Body Insight podcast tab. Follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.